All right, so I have Brad Marshall with me today. I wanted to talk about this BCAA thing that he's discovered. Probably other things will happen in this video. This is so I think the second time you've been on this channel, but this time I'm
Yeah.
actually going to link a podcast of this down below, so it'll be in the description section to those who just want to listen to it. But welcome to the channel.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, perfect.
It's been, probably a couple months since the last time. Not too long,
Yeah,
right?
and not too long. I think it was during the summer. I think it was a little warmer outside, but yeah.
Yeah.
So what's going on with you with this BCAA?
Well, yeah. So it's been really interesting, right? So, I don't want to say that I discovered the BCAA thing, of course. There's been the Lambing lab in particular, LAMMING. I don't even know where they are, what university, but um, they've done some really interesting studies. A lot of this came out of mice, and they've done a lot of studies in mice showing that if you restrict the branched chain amino acids, that this can fix the insulin resistance in the mice, and also can reverse the obesity if you do the normal diet induced obesity thing that people like to do in mice. So that's super interesting. But they also did a human clinical trial, and it was very short term. Like, I think it was only a month, maybe, or maybe even 2 weeks. But what they do show in the clinical trial is that if you reduce BCAAs, your circulating branched chain amino acids will drop, right? So that's always a question. It's like, we don't even know if you can affect your circulating levels with diet, but this clinical study showed that you can. And in that study, they showed a significant drop in blood glucose.
Hmm.
So that's very interesting. And I had done a study earlier in the summer. I think this is the last time I was talking to you. I was trialing. So I've done a lot of different approaches. I've been keto before in my life.
Yeah.
More recently, I've been experimenting with changing the types of fat that I'm consuming, and I've had some success with that, but I'm still not really, fixed, right? And so I tried a low carb approach early in the summer. Or sorry, let's try that again. I tried a low fat approach earlier in the summer, and it was okay, but I got some good results from it, but it wasn't, my blood glucose was still kind of high. It didn't seem like it was, I still didn't feel like I was like 100% of the way there, right? And I had seen these papers with the restriction of the branched chain amino acids, and I thought, let's give it a try, right? And so right now what I'm doing is a fairly low it's pretty low protein overall.
Yeah.
It's very low in branched chain amino acids, and it's pretty low fat. And so I'm doing a lot of like cassava or yuca, as it's sometimes called.
Yeah.
I'm using some I'm using this Fjordgut flour, which is this like purified wheat starch, which is
Wow.
like kind of like
Never
not
even heard of it.
it's good if you're gluten free and you want to make something that actually tastes like bread because it's made out of wheat starch, but it doesn't have any gluten in it.
Oh
They
wow.
removed all the protein and the gluten and everything. So it's an interesting product, but it's almost totally devoid of real nutrients, right? Like that's a but it's
Basically like
interesting.
sugar then.
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, it's starch, so there's no fructose in it, so it behaves a little differently than sugar. But um, so anyway, and I've been doing that, and I've been using a lot of gelatin. So I've been doing a lot of soups, broths. I'm cooking a Sunday sauce, like an Italian style sauce with pig's feet, on the stove right now because I'm trying to get in a lot of connective tissues and gelatin along with the low fat and the starch. And the reason for that is that so there's another interesting mouse study, or this is in rats, I think, but what they showed is that one of the problems that we have in obesity is we have um, energy toxicity, or I call it reductive stress. And what happens is you have too much buildup of fuel in your mitochondria, and then your mitochondria don't burn cleanly, right? And so, what they showed in the study is that in the rats, anyways, the branched chain amino acids were causing the muscle tissues, the muscle mitochondria, to be low in glycine.
Hmm.
And glycine is an amino acid. It's not technically one of the um, the essential amino acids, because we can, in theory, make it from other things, but
Yeah.
it's not one that we're very good at making a lot of. And so if you want more glycine, you kind of have to get it from your diet. And it turns out, anyway, the best source of glycine are things like gelatin and broth. And so, because all of our connective tissues are made out of collagen, which is mostly made out of, or is like 20% glycine, something like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, what the glycine is doing in your skeletal muscle is it goes in and it connects to extra, like, so you have extra fuel, which is acetyl-CoA or propionyl-CoA. It's essentially unburned extra fuel that's in the mitochondria, and it links to the glycine, and then you urinate out the extra acetyl-CoA in your urine. And they showed this in the rat study, being a key central mechanism to this branched chain amino acid induced insulin resistance. And so it's because what happens is if you have too much fat oxidation, too much buildup of fuel, NADH, acetyl-CoA in your mitochondria, you just can't switch over to burning glucose cleanly, because NADH and acetyl-CoA both inhibit pyruvate dehydrogenase. And pyruvate dehydrogenase is really the limiting enzyme in how fast you can burn glucose, right? Mm-hmm. So if your goal is to become insulin resistant and be able to oxidize glucose, you need to get some of that extra energy out of your mitochondria. And so anyway, and so that's why I switched from protein sources that were high in branched chain amino acids, which means both skeletal muscle, but also grains. Things like rice and corn aren't high in protein, but the protein that they do have is very high in branched chain amino acids. And so I was looking and thinking, I'm like, when I was doing the kind of low fat thing, even if you do it all with, something like rice or corn, you still wind up getting a lot of branched chain amino acids by the end of the day. Even though it's in smaller doses. Yeah. And so I was like, I'm just going to cut out all the grains and all the protein from the grains, I should say, because I am eating wheat starch. But and I'm gonna use like tropical root vegetables like cassava and green plantain, or like yam, like the actual yams, which are different than sweet potatoes.
Yeah, everybody thinks it's sweet potatoes. I'm like, no.
Well, that's what they call them in the American South, and that's fine, but it is confusing. And I've been doing a lot of gelatin, and what happened is I've also been using these glass noodles, which are these Asian noodles that are like made out of purified like sweet potato starch.
Yeah.
And so those are another thing that don't have any branched chain amino acids that you can use as a base of a meal, right? And so anyway, I've been eating these things, and within a week, my fasting blood glucose went from the 110s. So a lot of days I was seeing like 118, 119 was probably the most common, right? And this has been the case for a long time, and I've been trying to do things to fix it. And when I switched to this diet and replace the sources of protein, my fasting blood glucose just plunged. I mean, I was like, today was a little higher, but yesterday morning it was like 82.
Oh, wow.
And I've never seen numbers like that ever as an adult, right?
Wow.
And so I'm like, this is really interesting. And it's kind of combining three different, right? So there was a Kevin Hall paper in Nature in 2019, and he compared sort of low fat diets versus keto diets, right? And I think it's a very interesting study. I think it's very well done. But one of the things it showed was that in the group on the low fat diet, it did lower. So they're eating tons and tons of starch and carbohydrates, and it lowered their fasting blood glucose, right? And so that's interesting. But they're still eating a lot of branched chain amino acids in that study. It was a pretty high protein diet, 16% or something like that, which is kind of like the normal American diet, not crazy high, but it's certainly higher than what I'm doing now. And I looked at that, and then there's the paper that I mentioned with the branched chain amino acid restriction also lowers your blood glucose. And then there's another clinical trial showing that collagen supplementation lowers your blood glucose. And this is my assumption is this is because of that glycine mechanism that I talked about. And so I just kind of put those three ideas together, right? And did low protein, low branched chain amino acid, high starch and low glycine. And so far, I mean, it seems to be making all the difference. And it did it very quickly. I didn't have to wait for 3 months to get a result, which is always nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you've just started doing this. How long ago?
It's been about 3 weeks.
Have you thought about getting like an oral glucose tolerance test or anything like that doing this? Because I thought about doing that myself.
So it's a funny question. So I did one on myself this morning. So all an oral glucose tolerance test is they give you a glucose drink, and then you check your blood glucose every 30 minutes for 2 hours, right? Yeah. So I have the glucose tester, right, that you can get at any drugstore, and they sell the glucose tablets in the diabetic section of the drugstore. Okay. And so it's 75 grams of glucose, which isn't that much. It's like 20 they're like, I don't know, they kind of remind me of like Nico wafers, if you remember Nico wafers.
Yeah, I remember those things. Yeah.
So you eat like 20 of those, and you just monitor your blood glucose for the first 2 hours. And so I'm going to repeat this tomorrow because I've been using a couple of supplements, right? And one of them is RALA, which is alpha lipoic acid, which is a supplement that I really like because it lowers the NADH in your mitochondria. And so that, I think, really helps you burn glucose, right? And there's good clinical studies in humans that show that this is true. And so I've been taking that with my meals. Like I've been doing a big like pancake breakfast every day just to wake up and try to get my metabolism going. And that's probably 1,100 calories when I figure it all out. I have some orange juice and syrup, and it's a pretty big meal that I've been starting the day with. And so I lost my train of thought there for a second. Where was I going? Oh, right. And so anyway, so I've been doing that. And with that, I take RALA, and I've been taking this SEA that I sell and a couple other things, a B vitamin supplement. And these are all with the idea of getting my, getting my glucose burning going, right? Like be able to actually be insulin sensitive and burn glucose. And so I was kind of on the fence because I wanted to do this test this morning, and I was like, I'm interested in like how the supplements work as well as how my body's working, right? And so I was like, should I take the supplements with the glucose, because that's how I'd normally be eating breakfast? And so for me, that's sort of like more real world. And so that's what I did this morning. And it was funny because at the end of the glucose tolerance test, they say if you're below 140, or if you're above 140, they say you're pre-diabetic. Yeah. If you're over 200, then you're diabetic. Yeah. And so under 140 is like you pass the glucose tolerance test. Yeah. And when I did this morning, it was at the end, it was 67. And I was like, whoa, that's almost hypoglycemic. Yeah. So, which has never been a thing for me, right? This has never happened before for me. So it's all kind of like Brave New World, kind of interesting. Like every day I'm like, well, I didn't see that coming. And it's funny because in the beginning of the test, I was kind of high. And one of the things you see is in people with, metabolic syndrome, obesity, insulin resistance, whatever you want to call it, is that they're slower to shift to being able to burn glucose like in the morning. Like if you wake up and eat, whatever, bagels, it takes someone who's, metabolically challenged longer to shift over to burning that glucose. And in the beginning of the oral glucose tolerance test, I saw that. Like I was at 1 hour in, I was still at like 190. And it went up to 190 in the beginning, which is pretty high. So what I saw was that it seemed like my glucose burning was delayed, but then once it fired up, I guess it really fired up. And, that's probably because I've been eating. I mean, the meal that I make in the morning is probably 200 and it's well over 200 grams of glucose. And so for me, the 75-gram glucose, which is the standard, oral glucose tolerance test, is not that much. So anyway, I was sort of shocked at the result, and I'm not.
Yeah.
So tomorrow I'm going to try it without the ALA and the B vitamins, and just see how it changes. Right.
Difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
That's interesting. I
was going to say the other thing is I didn't sleep very well last night, which often happens to me this time of year. And that can also hurt your score on a glucose tolerance test. So I almost like didn't do it this morning because I was like, man, I barely slept last night. Like, I don't want that to influence the result, but I'm like, here I am, and I'm ready to go. I might as well just do it and see what happens, right? If it doesn't work, we can try it again. But anyway, that's what happened. So it was a very interesting morning in that sense.
I think the sleep has something to do with vitamin D, because I know during the summer, because I'm outside like 5-6 hours a day. I mean, I pass out. Like I usually don't even remember getting to the bed. I just remember waking up the next morning. But lately I'm like, what in the hell is going on? Here we go again with this. But I do notice that on days I have rice, I sleep way better than on days that I have like potatoes or something like that. So that kind of depresses me about your little study here.
Right.
because,
well,
yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know why that. Yeah, I don't know why that should be, but yeah, I mean, for me, it's always when it's spring and fall. It's like when the day length is changing, it like messes up my circadian rhythm or something. It reliably happens in March and then again in October. So I'm like, or March, April, and then again in October. So I'm like, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
That's annoying.
I just have learned to deal with it, but it sucks.
Yeah.
And so, and partially I was just thinking about, whatever my brain was going, because I was thinking about doing this test in the morning and having, whatever, all the things. And so, it just wasn't very restful, but anyway, that's what's happened. And so, it's interesting because the branched chain amino acid thing and the glycine thing, the first paper that reported, it was back in 1969. It was initially reported that obese humans have high circulating branched chain amino acids and low circulating glycine. And so, we've known this for a very long time. So it's interesting. You see the things that it's like the things that get press and that people talk about and wind up in the mainstream. And then there's these other things that have been happening forever that, are just sort of like off everyone's radar.
Things that don't make money usually are off the radar.
Yeah, right. And so, it's like people talk about, obviously in the meantime, there's this whole debate over how much, should I eat low fat, plant-based keto, right? There's all these discussions, but like this one, I'm like shocked that it hasn't gotten more people talking about it, because the literature around it is pretty compelling. And not a lot of people are, I mean, I think in a lot of vegan circles, like I've heard T. Colin Campbell talk about, well, the problem is too much protein, or animal proteins, perhaps, maybe. But so you hear that here and there, but I don't think that anyone in the kind of like real, I don't know, nutritional space has really specifically looked at these 4 amino acids. Really is all that it is. Valine, and people are wondering. So the branched chain amino acids are valine, leucine, and isoleucine, and then glycine is just glycine. It's another amino acid. And it is easy to get. And if you read online, it says that animal foods are a lot higher in branched chain amino acids. That's kind of not true. If you eat 16% protein on a diet that's a lot of beef, you're going to get the same amount of branched chain amino acids if you eat a 16% protein diet that's rice and beans, because they're all essentially the same in terms of the percent of protein. It may be the case, and probably is the case, that people on vegetarian diets get less protein in general.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, for sure.
And so I think there's something to it, but I think it sort of misses some of the point that's, if you are someone who is on a vegetarian diet and you're doing a lot of beans and grains and, tofu, seitan, you can get plenty of branched chain amino acids that way. So it's not necessarily, and conversely, you can do, you can eat pig's feet all day and you will get much less branched chain amino acids. You know what I mean? So it just depends, right? like so many other things in life, there's a lot of subtleties to it.
There is. And, when I was, I lifted from 92 to like heavy, from 92 to probably 2012, I think, somewhere in there. And I mean, they push those BCAAs like hard, like in the bodybuilding circles hard. So
Yeah.
that's surprising to me, because I mean, of all people, they're trying to stay as low fat as possible.
Well, it's interesting because so the BCAAs are very anabolic, right? They activate mTOR. mTOR needs leucine to do its thing.
Yeah.
And the other BCAAs also seem to activate mTOR, and mTOR is an anabolic. I want to call it an enzyme. It's not really an enzyme. It's an anabolic factor, and so, but the problem with mTOR is it helps you build muscle and it helps you build fat.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a double-edged sword.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, and so what I see is that in people who are insulin sensitive, mTOR or the BCAAs can absolutely help you build muscle, and they can be very helpful. But if you're not that, once you're insulin resistant, the branched chain amino acids seem to add to the problem, because they're activating this thing that's telling you to grow, right? And you're in a metabolic state that obviously you've been growing a lot of fat, right? So you're gonna grow something.
Yeah.
And most people are there's another interesting study I was looking at. This was from the 70s, and they looked at obese humans. They had three categories, and the one was kind of like normal lean people, and another one was strong people, and it was a little bit ill-defined exactly how they defined strong, but obviously people that you'd look at and say, well, that guy's pretty muscular. And then they had obese people, and the obese people had more lean mass than the people who were, quote, muscular. So so in obesity, most, maybe not everyone, but most people in obesity are building both lean mass and fat mass, right? And so it's like, how do we stop that process? It's like, well, the branched chain amino acids are the anabolic things that are telling us, that are constantly giving our bodies the signal to grow. And obviously, as an adult human, sure, we want to maintain body mass, but we don't really want to be growing per se, right? Growing seems like a bad idea once you're an adult. So yeah, and so that, I think, probably, and there's a lot to it, of course. Biology is always complicated, and like the connection to glycine, there's the mTOR thing, some of the breakdown products of the branched chain amino acids. If you feed them to mice, they cause insulin resistance directly. And so there's a lot of different factors at play, and of course the full story is yet to be uncovered. But I mean, you can also see, like, so they had a mouse study. This was an interesting one. All they did was restrict isovaline. So it's just a single amino acid. It's one of the branched chain amino acids, and it completely reversed diet-induced obesity in these mice.
Hmm.
And so, it seems like there's really something. It's hard for me to believe that if there wasn't something there, that you'd be seeing these dramatic results in these mouse studies, and that you know in humans, you have high circulating branched chain amino acids and low glycine. If you limit the BCAAs in humans, blood glucose comes down. If you restrict the BCAAs in mice, diet-induced obesity is reversed. We have a lot of points of evidence lining up that this is probably important. And so, right. So then when I did my little N=1 trial here, I go, okay, yeah, I think this is real, right? This is maybe of use in a lot of actual people.
Yeah.
It's kind of the that's pretty much the extent of the BCAA research I think that's out there, but it's pretty compelling though.
It is, if you look at protein in nature, it is almost always attached to fat. And if you're eating lean protein of any kind, would that be the reason that you're getting more BCAAs than you're really supposed to? I mean, if you really look at, like, if you look at nuts, for example, if you look at most meats, if you look at most sources of protein, there's usually a half decent amount of fat attached with that. And you're talking about, the people who were obese had more lean muscle, but they also had fat. They even had more protein with more fat. So does fat have anything to do with blocking the extra BCAAs from getting in the system?
Well, I would think about it like this. I would think that so protein is probably a sign of plentiful times, right? I'm a biologist, so I tend to think about it all the way back. I'm like, well, the first mammals were something kind of like shrews, right? And shrews burrow underground and they eat worms and bugs. And so if a shrew is finding a lot of worms, he's got a lot of BCAAs coming in, he's got a lot of protein, like, okay, maybe it's a female shrew and she says times are plentiful, maybe it's time to reproduce, right? And have a litter, and that's growth, of course.
Yeah.
Right. And so then sure, then fast forward that same argument into humans. If you're hunting, if you make a kill, protein comes in. This is, times are plentiful, good time to grow. And then what I would think about the fat is that if the BCAAs are activating mTOR, and that's a sign for growth, then the secondary question is, in what way are we going to grow, right? There's a lot of different kinds of growth. You can grow lean mass, you can grow fat, you can reproduce. And so I think that if you're consuming a lot of fat and the wrong kinds of fats, I think that can push you towards, and of course I prefer to keep my fats saturated, because it seems like the unsaturated fats are worse have a worse effect on the NADH to NAD plus ratio.
Yeah.
And to me that NADH to NAD plus ratio is a key controlling variable. And so if you have too much NADH, if you're in reductive stress, if you have energy overload and you're activating mTOR, then you're going to build fat, because the de novo lipogenesis pathways are all upregulated. If you have too much NADH, if you have too much acetyl-CoA in your mitochondria, they're saying like, okay, we're getting this signal to grow. We've got all this extra fuel around. We should build fat, right? There might be another scenario if you're insulin resistant, if you're not in reductive stress, if you don't have energy toxicity, that you get that same growth signal and you're more likely to build lean mass in that case, right? And so I always think that you have to think about what's the signal that's happening, what does the signal that's coming in mean, and what's the context under which it's happening, right? Because those two things are pretty much going to determine your end result. Yeah, and so I think right, and so I think yeah, that's why. Sure, like it, I'm trying to think like worst case scenario. So, um, yeah, if you're getting a lot of protein and a lot of I don't love the idea of eating like one thing that's popular in America, right? That is massively increased since 1950, say, is chicken,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, it has no purpose. I don't think we should be eating it.
Right, and think about chicken. So chicken is exactly what I'm describing, right? It's uh the protein in a chicken is very dense. So like a chicken breast is very high in branched chain amino acids, and chickens are pretty fatty, right? I mean, if you roast the whole bird, it's a lot of fat, and that fat is mostly polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. And so to me, that's like a perfect, a roast chicken. It's like a perfect way to fatten up.
Yeah.
And in 1950, it took uh it took 24 weeks. It took essentially 6 months to raise a chicken that was big enough to sell like a 3-pound roasting chicken.
Yeah.
And then in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we bred them to be these, now they're 6 or 7 weeks
Yeah.
old in the grocery store, which is amazing, to go from this egg to this big fat roasting bird in 7 weeks. It's a fascinating feat of that it's even possible, but but I think that's a good example of like a type of food that has really, I mean, it's the growth of the amount of chicken that Americans eat between 1950 and now is just phenomenal. It's crazy. It's explosive. It's insane. And so that's like where, and then just to tie that back into like traditional, cuisine, which I also love to talk about. So, God, I'm so bad at remembering names on the spot. Julia Childs, wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking, and she talks about roasting chickens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her main recipe for roast chicken is basically you put the bird in the oven, you cook it for an hour, all of the fat that renders out of the bird, you remove it, and you replace it with butter.
Oh, wow.
That is the classic French recipe. And like when I went to the French Culinary Institute in the beginning, the base of all the recipes, we would use pork lardon, which are like little strips of pork belly, and you'd saute those and get some of the fat. But it was always an equal amount of butter and the pork fat. And it was like, don't go too, right? All the recipes are sort of like, you can use pork fat, but you have to balance them with butter. Or if you're roasting a chicken, remove the chicken fat and replace it with butter, because the French had this idea that, well, I don't know where the ideas come from, right? It's just, they're always passed down as like, well, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of examples of this in French cuisine of like, we should be replacing these very unsaturated fats. And so that's why I stick by, butter and as probably the single best source of fat that we have. Because butter is, people don't realize, is something like 75% saturated.
Oh, wow.
And beef fat is like 45% saturated. And so people think of, well, beef fat and butter are both saturated, right? Well, not really. The butter is the saturated one. And so that's my preferred choice of fat, but that's a whole nother complicated discussion. Getting into PPAR alpha and nuclear receptors, and we can go there if you want to. But
well, there is one subject that I wanted to talk to you about because everybody else thinks I'm nuts. I interviewed McDougall, and I told him, I said, I'm doing your plan, and I said, I lost 150 pounds, which is a lot,
right? Sure.
But I fluctuate between 220, which I'm not there now, and 280 effortlessly without changing in diet. And people in the comment section, well, you just got to cut your calories and just eat 8 calories a day and you'll be fine. I'm like, that doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
There is a certain point. Like if a person hits like 400 or 500 pounds, there's a point of like no return to like, you can get kind of a normal weight, but like getting to a normal weight is just like I don't understand. Now, if I went raw vegan, it would happen like crazy, but I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
So and then I got like I've interviewed Durian Ryder quite a few times, and he's like, "Well, you just got to eat more sugar." I'm like, if I eat any more sugar, I mean, my stomach is like it can't handle it, right?
Yeah.
But and these two both are like, I am always stuck in fight or flight. My brain, and if I go get my cortisol tested, it always looks normal, and everybody thinks I'm nuts. But I mean, I literally, I had to fight myself to go take the garbage out today because it's like, oh, that's so much work. My brain is always stuck, or my adrenals or something is always stuck in this fight or flight. And it has my body just holding on to fat because it feels like it's in some kind of famine. And if I could ever figure out how to get myself out of that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and so, right. And so what happens is, and again, this is how I always go back to evolutionary theory, right? And so if you think about obesity as an evolutionary problem, let's say, or an evolutionary strategy is really a better way to say it, right? The idea is that there are certain scenarios where mammals want to be fat, and this is, winter's coming. We need to fatten up for winter, right? That's biologically advantageous. And what happens is once you get into that mode, all of these positive feedback loops kick in that are helping you to stay fat, right? And so what happens is a diet that so the McDougall diet, if that diet is in a culture that starts off metabolically healthy, sure, that'll keep them metabolically healthy. There's no question about it, right? There's tons of examples of this around the world. But once you get off those rails, now it's not so easy. It's right. No, it's not so simple to just say, well, if you just switch to that diet, then you'll instantly be lean. No. And there's lots of it. And again, there's lots of examples of this in rodent studies. And, people ask me like, well, when do the hibernating animals get out of this kind of like torpid metabolism? And the more I look at it, I'm like, well, some of them never do. I mean, bears are always high percentage of body fat. Like even in the spring after they hibernate, they're still pretty fatty, and their fat is still very unsaturated. So the hibernating animals have very unsaturated fat compared to any animal that's always warm-blooded. And so then you have to okay, well, what are the things that are keeping me trapped there? And one of the things I talk about all the time are the desaturase enzymes. And so and again, everything kind of funnels through the same pathways. So there's one called SCD1, and it's taking your stearic acid and it's converting it to oleic acid, and this is a problem. And then we have this other one called D6D, and what it's doing is it's taking linoleic acid, the polyunsaturated fat, and it's converting it to the oxidized. I wish there was a better name for these things, the oxylipins or the oxylipids or the oxidized linoleic acid metabolites. But these are the kind of oxidized fats that people worry about, and the limiting factor is this delta 6 desaturase, and both of those things are driven forward by NADH. Both desaturases, the higher the NADH to NAD plus ratio is, the more of this desaturating thing that they're going to do. And if those are both going, you're never going to get out of it. You're stuck forever. And then the other thing you see is, the inflammatory things. And so, but they're all connected. I've been reading these two Natambi papers, which are really interesting. And what they show is that in, so a hibernating animal increases the expression of SCD1 as winter approaches. And SCD1 converts your saturated fat to monounsaturated fat. And so what they showed in this paper is that in mice that have elevated SCD1 in their actually they showed the opposite. In mice where they reduced SCD1 in their adipose tissue, they're making a lot less inflammatory cytokines, things like tissue necrosis factor alpha. And it also affects the leakiness of your gut. And so you see, okay, once these desaturases become upregulated, that's controlling the whole inflammatory process, which is happening between your gut, which is leaky and allowing in things like LPS and bacterial toxins, and your adipose tissue, which is recognizing those bacterial toxins and responding to it. And there's more. And then once the desaturases get upregulated, this is another paper by the same group, but it increases these endocannabinoids. And if the endocannabinoids are elevated, your metabolic rate goes down, you get the munchies, your appetite is dysregulated. And so all of these systems are kind of connected, right? It's when if you think about any of these individual systems as sort of like an individual pathology, then it's like, oh man, this is how are we ever going to solve this? We have inflammation happening in the gut. We have elevated endocannabinoids. We have, we have 100 different, right? We have to focus on all these different areas and fix all these different things. But if you think about it as a process, an evolutionary process, and say, okay, well, what's the head of the snake, right? How do we, and that's what I'm right. And so that's how I like to think about it, is like, let's put all of these things that seem like separate problems, are probably being regulated by some central factor, which is, there's a switch that we can turn on that's like, okay, time to fatten up for winter, and somehow we mistakenly switch that thing on, and now how do we switch it off, right?
Switch it off.
And so but one of the BCAAs, to take this discussion back to that discussion, so one of the things that hibernating animals do in the winter is they go 6 months without eating any protein. And when they come out of hibernation in the spring, they have the same amount of muscle tissue as they did in the fall. And so they go into this muscle sparing mode, or they turn down the enzymes that break down the branched chain amino acids, right? And so if you're in this torpid metabolism, I would argue, that's why you're not able to break down the branched chain amino acids in the first place. And so, and so we're eating these branched chain amino acids, and they can't be broken down because, we're in this different metabolic state. And in that metabolic state, those BCAAs are used to fuel growth rather than to be oxidized. And, the irony is, if you can consume a lot of branched chain amino acids and burn them, they're highly thermogenic. So, BCAAs, if you're good at oxidizing them, you can, and this is another thing that probably works for bodybuilders, is that BCAAs, as they burn, regenerate a lot of NAD+. Like, they're highly thermogenic, they will get you going. But if you're insulin resistant and if you're in the wrong state, you're probably stuck in muscle sparing mode. You probably can't break them down. The good news about that is that you can lose weight while maintaining lean mass. But the bad news is that any BCAAs that you get are going to increase your insulin resistance, I suspect. But that's kind of to put it into, right, that's to put the discussion into a broader evolutionary context. And then, so then what are the big levers that we can pull? And this is why in the beginning I said, well, one of the things I like to take is alpha lipoic acid, because that essentially goes straight into your mitochondria, and it converts NADH to NAD+. And so that's like this core lever that we can pull that affects essentially all the tissues. And it's this can really help it's sort of like it's definitely a cheat code for sure. There's nothing terribly, you do get ALA in food. I mean, all of our cells make alpha lipoic acid. It's actually used as a cofactor in pyruvate dehydrogenase and in branched chain keto acid dehydrogenase, the things that break down pyruvate and these branched chain amino acids. But there's no evidence that when we take it as a supplement, it actually gets picked up and used in these systems. I think as a supplement, it's just affecting NADH to NAD+. And so that's one thing. And I've been selling SCA on my website, which is a way of, we've been making so much of these desaturase enzymes over the years that if you look, over the past 100 years, our stearic acid levels on our fat tissues have dropped. So
we talked about that the last night. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so that to me is like our endocannabinoids that we make are totally different than what people would have made 100 years ago because our fat composition is different. And those endocannabinoids are involved in inflammation, they're involved in metabolic rate, they're involved in all kinds of things. And the SEA helps break down the excess endocannabinoids, and it reduces inflammation, and it hits all these parts of this cycle, right? And so right, that's what I'm trying to do, right, is find what are these big high level things that this kind of process of fattening is all sort of keyed off of, right? And yeah, it's complicated because there's 1,000 little things.
It is, yeah.
And people talk about them all the time, but yeah, it's like, how do we, what are the underlying things that we can really affect?
Yeah, I mean, McDougall essentially called me a liar that I wasn't following his program. You know, everybody implies that. I'm like, I will literally text you my address. You can stop by unannounced anytime and see what's in this house. You know, but another thing that I really struggle with is when the inflammatory response and the cortisol is really high, I can't eat. I can literally go 8, 9, 10 hours without being hungry because I can't even get it down. Like, so that is another issue that I run into, that everybody, and like in the comment section, everybody's like, well, you probably just eat all day. And I'm like, okay, you know, okay, right. I didn't know that, I mean, but
you know, right. There's all kinds of studies in humans showing that, you know, with calorie restriction, where it's like, get calories down to 1200 calories a day and the weight loss still plateaus, right? Because and calorie. And so I did a video the other day, and it's ironic, right? So I think that trying to burn a lot of fat all at the same time is problematic, especially if that fat is very unsaturated, right? That's my baseline theory. And so guess what happens if you eat less calories? Well, you start burning all your body fat. So you're flooding your mitochondria with your very unsaturated body fat. And that leads to all the problems. That increases NADH to NAD plus ratio. That increases the desaturases. That I did a video a month ago called The Dark Side of Calorie Restriction, and showed that in calorie restricted diets, you massively increase the activity of this delta 6 desaturase. And so you wind up with a whole bunch of this oxidized PUFA, right? A great way, if you want to make more of these oxidized inflammatory signaling molecules, is to reduce calories. And so that's the trap that we find ourselves in, right? The body has all of these ways of you know, and maybe if we were a hibernating animal and we could literally just lay down and sleep and lower our metabolic rate for 6 months and eat nothing, maybe that problem would fix itself. But obviously that's not how it works in humans exactly.
No.
But yeah, no, I think there are real damaging things that happen in calorie restriction that are kind of underappreciated.
I think they have lasting effects too. I think they have
absolutely, yeah,
permanently lasting effects, and I think I am stuck in that.
Well, Kevin Hall, you know, and I'll say this. So I was a wrestler in high school, and
and you had to make weight.
I had to make weight, and I was a chubby kid, right? And so at the beginning of every school year, I'd be 180 to 185 pounds, and I wrestled 155 pounds. So every year I essentially just starved myself for like 2 months to get down to weight, right? And I did this, every year in high school, right? So I did these 4 different starvation diets, one year after the other, after the other, after the other in high school. And so if you look at Kevin Hall did I think it was also Kevin Hall did another paper on The Biggest Loser TV show, right? And I don't know if you've heard of this one, but they followed around the biggest. He followed the Biggest Loser contestants for 7 years. So he took a bunch of measurements on them beforehand. They measured their metabolic rate, and then 7 years after the show, 95% of them, right, regain all of the weight, and usually then some, right?
Yeah.
And so he went and he looked at those people that had been on the show, and he found no, they had even 7 years later, they had permanently lowered their metabolic rate, compared to their, based on their lean mass, compared to the beginning of the show. And so it's like, yeah, no, it does long-term damage for sure.
It does. And I try to tell people this. I'm like, don't do it. Like, don't do it.
Yeah.
When I lost all this weight, the 150 pounds, I was eating 7,000 to 8,000 calories a day.
Yeah, I believe it. And so the other thing I say is that fat burns in the flame of carbohydrate, which is just an old thing they used to say in the medical literature. They would tell medical students this, in the 1930s and 40s. And there's something true about it. When you're burning carbs and you're burning them efficiently, it pushes up NAD+, which is exactly what you need to burn the fat. And so there's this idea that if you consume a lot of calories of carbohydrate, you can use that as leverage to help burn the fat. But yeah, of course, there are all kinds of places where that can break down as well. And it depends on the saturation level of your fat. It depends on your enzymes. It depends on, the endocannabinoid system. It depends on inflammation, right? CD38, if you wind up with elevated CD38 in your bloodstream, which is an inflammatory thing, that will rob you of your circulating NAD+. And the reason I keep talking about NAD+, by the way, is that, the NAD+ in your mitochondria is sort of literally playing the part of oxygen, right? We say that we oxidize our fuel, we burn our food, right? But the way the mitochondria is structured and the way everything's set up, the oxygen is interacting with the electron transport chain, right? But it never really directly interacts with calories. It never interacts with carbohydrates or acetyl-CoA or anything else. The thing that directly interacts with our fuel is NAD+, and it usually is working through these dehydrogenase enzymes, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. The point is that, the electrons, right. So one of the ways to think about calories is they're just electrons, right? Our food is electron rich.
Yeah.
And the electrons move ultimately to oxygen, but the first step is always the electrons moving to NAD+. And so, NAD+ in the context of a mitochondria sort of is oxygen, right? And the reason that you can't burn your food, your fuel, is you don't have enough oxygen. It's, I like to make an analogy to a carburetor, which cars don't have anymore, but the carburetor is the thing that mixes the air and the fuel. Yeah. And if you have too much fuel and not enough air, the carburetor doesn't burn. The car backfires, you get black smoke out of the tailpipe. So you have to increase the amount of oxygen, and the NAD+ essentially in the mitochondria is the oxygen. Anyway, yeah.
So where do you go from there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the BCAAs in fruit very much or no?
No, fruit has almost no protein. So yeah.
That might be it. That might be the reason why. Because last year, I don't mean to make this all about me, but this only
no. It's a good
last year for Lent, for 40 days, I did raw. I lost 25 pounds in that 40-day period, and I was raw vegan. But I broke that with rice. And the second I did that, I have not lost a single pound since.
And the raw vegan diet was a lot of fruit?
Yeah, a lot of fruit.
Well, I mean, right. So if you went from fruit to rice, you would have had a massive increase in BCAAs.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's it.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, yeah, right there, right? I mean, I don't know what else you ate on the raw vegan diet, but
it was fruit, it was greens, it was avocado once in a while. I did the Goldener thing for like 3 days with the flaxseed, and I'm like, I hate this.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but my inflammation's always high. Like when I went to the chiropractor the first time, he's like, dude, you got the back of a 75-year-old. He's like, it's like completely locked. He's like, I don't even know what to do with you. So, I had to go back all the time.
Right, right. Um, yeah, I mean, it could well be the BCAAs. Fruit is, you know, there's I personally don't I can't imagine eating a fruit-based diet like
Yeah,
just as a
it
like
sucks. I
it
hate it.
sucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But if you want a diet that's low in BCAAs, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much other protein there either. At some point, you'll need some protein,
Yeah.
but I
That's where
do,
the greens come in.
but I do think that of course, there's people on um, whatever Twitter, lots of places, right? That will freak out if I say, "Oh, I'm really restricting protein," right? And I do think that and you and I are probably examples of this. Like my problem has never been lack of muscle, right?
No.
I've always been a muscular guy,
Yeah.
but I'm also fat, and um, I do think that is very suggestive that we're in this state of kind of muscle sparing mode. And so I think if that is the case for you, that you can restrict protein a lot more aggressively than probably someone who's skinny fat or something like that. You know what I mean? And so because I don't think there's as much chance of, well, I mean, like I say, the hibernating animals go 6 months without eating any protein and they
Yeah.
don't lose any muscle mass, or they lose extraordinarily little muscle mass, I should say. And I think there's something to that. I think we can leverage that, right? It's like, okay, well, let's yeah, I mean, let's try dropping some of the protein and see what happens.
I
And
I try not to have too much because honestly, if I do, I start smelling like ammonia.
right, yeah, yeah, sure.
It's
I
terrible. I
mean,
mean, I'm not talking like a lot either. I used to eat a lot, but I was keto. I did keto, I did carnivore, I did all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking like if I get to like I don't know 75 grams or something like that in that range a day, I smell terrible. I smell so bad. I immediately know that I had a lot of protein.
well, it's so one of the ways this actually plays out in real life. Uh, there's a whole industry that is doing low protein diet for pigs, and the main reason that they want to do that is to decrease the smell of the manure, right?
Oh, well,
So if pigs are eating a lot of protein, they need certain essential amino acids, right? The rest gets excreted in the urine and in the feces. And so if you limit the protein and give them only the specific amino acids that they need, you get a lot less nitrogen in the urine and in the manure, possibly in the sweat, although I don't know if anyone's looked at that. Um, and so that is a real thing. If you're not using if you're not oxidizing the protein, and if you start eating more protein and notice more nitrogen smell, then I mean, it's pretty logical that you're probably not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. You'd have to know exactly what those compounds are, et cetera. But it's an interesting
it
an
is.
interesting thought. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I would be curious. I mean, I don't know what your current dietary strategy is, but I'd also be curious what would happen if you increased, if you use some gelatin or whatever to help move on some of the clear out the cells, because I do think there really is this yin and yang between the BCAAs and the glycine. It seems like
Where else would you get glycine from? Because I've never liked gelatin. I can't even eat Jello. I never could even eat Jello.
well, there's not a lot of great sources. I mean, it's mostly connective tissue, right? So the largest protein, the single largest protein in our body is collagen, right? Which is what our skin and all tendons are all made out of. But anything that's any broth, I mean, bone, just beef stock, any, I don't know if you like soup, but any broth is going to have gelatin. And then you're looking at then after that, right? And of course, there's Jello, aspic. I mean, I like head cheese, but you probably won't like head cheese.
No, I never did. No.
And whatever. And pork rinds, of course, is another connective tissue, right? That has a lot of glycine. If you go to the Korean restaurant, they have that soup that has the beef tendon in it. That's like pure collagen, really. And so there's a lot of things, but they're not. Yeah, some people are very squeamish about them.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
never was a fan.
I'm less so on that. I don't mind the gelatinous things. I like them. I don't like organ meats. I've never liked the taste of liver, but I like the gelatin things just fine.
Yes.
And I like cassava, so that's good.
Because
Although
I don't know that I've ever even had it, honestly.
it's very good. It's like a potato, but it's much denser. It's like a pound of potatoes has, making up the numbers, but let's say a pound of potatoes has 350 calories. A pound of cassava has like 700 calories, and it's all starch. There's almost no protein in it. There's almost no fat in it. It is like the purest form of starch that one can get in the natural world. But it's very good. I think the flavor is great. The texture is nice. It has like I think it's something that most people who try it are going to be like, oh, this is pretty good. And it's filling, it's satisfying, and it has essentially 0 branched chain amino acids. And it doesn't have like a weird, I've tried a bunch of the different tropical tubers that are low in branched chain amino acids. Most of them I do not like.
No, they have they have a weird aftertaste.
They
don't
have
like
a weird
them at all.
aftertaste. Some of the textures, like, I tried what's the purple one that they make poi out of in Hawaii? That one is taro.
Oh yeah, I don't like that one at all.
Taro has a weird texture. Yeah. It's not good. But cassava's great. It's by far the best one. So yeah, I recommend people try cassava. It's fantastic. I mean, it's a little bit of a pain to peel, but it's honestly not any harder than prepping potatoes. And the reason is that one root is like, you have to peel it and cut it up, but then like that's a whole meal because they're huge. They're like this big.
Yeah. They're usually covered in wax, right?
They wax them. Yeah. There's like a heavy wax skin, but you can take it off with a good potato peeler.
Yeah.
It's a little more work than a potato, but you only have to peel one. So
yeah,
it's kind of not a big deal.
Yeah.
So I can't recommend cassava high enough. I'm trying to think what other things. Yeah, I've been trying to, I don't know if you, what your sort of like schedule is, but one of the things I've been making a point of doing, because I'm a person who, left to my own devices, I'm happy to skip breakfast.
Yeah.
And I'll eat later in the day. So I've been making a conscious effort to eat earlier. I try to get that first big meal in by 8 or so. And then I'm kind of having my last meal by 6 or 6:30 p.m. I don't know the effect that's had, but it's I think there's probably something to it. I think the idea of waking up and sort of getting out of fasting mode and getting into that mode where you're actually burning fuel and burning glucose early on, and so you can do that most of the day, is probably pretty advantageous.
Yeah. For me, because it's all about cortisol for me. So like if you can start getting that cortisol kind of lower over the day, then I can actually sleep at night. Because if I don't do that, I mean, I'm just wired by nighttime. It's crazy.
Sure. Yeah. I haven't really, the truth is I haven't checked my cortisol much. I probably should. But it's another, there's a lot of things in the world.
Yeah. I almost don't want to know.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't realize it was 3:00 already. I gotta get running here, but we really should do this again because a lot of people mentioned you in my comments section, so I figured have you on here, and the BCAA kept coming up.
Yeah. No, it's great. I'll come on anytime. This is fun, and I'm still kind of like shocked at what is happening with this BCAA restriction. I mean, it really is like, this is the thing the whole time. And it's been right there. Like, we've known about it since 1969. So it's just one of these things that's kind of fallen through the cracks, and someone has picked it up, and I stumbled across it in the literature, and I was like, oh, let's see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe next time you're on here, I'll barely even be able to see you. It'd be like a,
That's
like
right.
a twig. Yeah,
I might be.
Are you even there? Yeah. Anyway, I'll put your links down in the description section like always. Go check Brad out, watch his videos. It's a lot of terminology, but it is interesting. And
I feel like if people listen to like 4 or 5, you start to like, okay, you get some of the language, but there's always new things too.
It is. All right. Well, thanks for being on.
All right, thank you for having me.
Peace.
All right, we'll talk soon.